and so I hope you'll join me in welcoming them one by one. To begin with, the co-writer and director, Tim Fehlbaum. Next up, please welcome from the cast, Peter Sarsgaard. Joining us next is going to be John Magaro. And last but certainly not least, please welcome Ben Chaplin. All right, guys, here we go, Ben.
You are the ones with ladders of steel who have to go. Thank you for staying.
Really dramatic lighting.
Well, guys, thank you for being here. Congratulations on the film. And I want to begin with Tim. Tim, I think a lot of people are excited to get to know you now after this film. Can you just tell us a little bit about where you are from and your prior film? This is your third film, and just sort of what led you to this amazing story.
Yes, very happy to do that. I learned in the meantime that there's quite an important, I don't know much about baseball, but there's an important baseball game. I watched a movie with you guys, and then I went out, and then I saw like these people were always there, they were watching baseball. So I thank you more for being here.
Should we tell you what happened? No?
Some of them are they're gonna go watch.
Okay. Yes. This is my third movie. I'm from Switzerland. I studied at the Munich Film School. That's also why in Munich that traffic storage is not impressive. The Swiss. I said I made 3 movies, and I studied film in Munich. And where these real buildings are is actually the student city now. So we shot a lot of student movies were shot there. And this is where this tragic story actually happened. And to get back to your question, how I came up with the idea, or how we came up with the idea, I introduced you to my producing partners. It's an interesting story because actually we wanted to do something generally about that day in Munich. So we were with the writer and producers, we were researching a lot on all sides. We had access to the police files that only recently have been made accessible to the public. We researched about the politician side, everything. And also quite early on we learned that the media played an important role on that day. Especially the TV channel ABC Sports, because they were the only ones having a live camera on site. And we were then lucky enough to find an eyewitness and had a conversation with him. That is Jeffrey Mason, the character that John plays in the movie. And we had a quite long research conversation with him, and it was really interesting, and he told us about everything that they experienced, he experienced in these 22 hours of broadcasting on this tragedy. And this was so interesting and seemed also, in a way, so, although it's happened such a long time ago, so relevant for today's media world, in a way, that afterwards we then said, like, maybe it could be an idea that we tell the story only from that perspective. And this I immediately found intriguing because, like, just from a filmmaker's point of view, to tell a story that takes place in that condensed space is an interesting challenge, right? How do you do that? I love movies that take place in a very condensed space and time.
Hitchcock and all these.
Every Window is probably the best example, where you also have the camera only as a window to the outside world. And the other thing is that, as someone who's working in the media myself, I found it connected to that, or thought that this is something that I could tell a story about. Nowadays, it's more and more in the it's an important discussion in who can tell a story and what, right? And I think that's good that we have this discussion more and more. And I felt that, can I tell something about the media? Yes, I can. Probably other sides of that story, I don't know if I would be.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, also producers love the idea for another reason also. I think we could do it for only a fraction of the original budget.
Yeah.
The original script was really long, and then we didn't really know how to finance it. And I'm just saying that because I think it's an interesting example of that sometimes a restriction of budget or it can lead to a more can inspire creative thoughts.
Absolutely.
Maybe then lead to a more interesting result.
Well, and one limitation that I think you guys imposed upon yourselves, which is really cool about this film, I think, is the fact that you were going to blend actors with archival footage, but that was not going to be possible without the blessing of ABC, which is now owned by Disney, which is doesn't give out stuff without conversation. So was that Jeff Mason, as one of the original guys who was a survivor of that day, was he able to help facilitate access to some of that?
Oh yeah, very much. It's exactly as you say. I can take credit for that. That was the producers that really did a tremendous job on getting these rights, because it was really complicated. And at the same time, it seemed crucial for us to have that footage. I have to say, some of the scenes that were what we staged again, but because it's a different angle that we needed. So we also shot some scenes in the Olympic Village. But on the other hand, it was always clear for us that we want to have the original footage, mostly for the reason that you just mentioned, Jim McKay, because it would have been really tough to recreate or imitate Jim McKay with an actor. But so that's and then the real Jeffrey Mason, he's very connected in the sports world still, and he could then help us. And when I was with John and I went to control rooms in New York to study the dynamics there, to how these people talk to each other and everything. And when we were there was a lucky incident that I ran into the son of Jim McKay, Sean McManus, who was the head of CBS Sports. And he then also gave us his blessing. And I think this helped us to get the copyrights.
That's great. Well, let's talk about how this amazing ensemble came together. And John, can you lead us off? I mean, Jeff is unfortunately one of the few real people who, from that control room, who are still with us. Was when you heard about this project, what was it that excited you the most? And then also having access to Jeff, was that something you were able to really benefit from?
Yeah, when the script was sent to me, Peter was already on board, so that was a good sign. And Sean Penn was one of our producers, so that was a good sign. So immediately I knew there had to be something here. A lot of times when you get a script cold, you're going into it totally blind. But seeing those two names really sort of put my mind at ease. So I started reading it, kept me on the edge of my seat. I found it thrilling, kept turning the pages, and it's actually quite brief. It's only, I think the script was 90 pages probably, so it was a very fast read. And for me, there were two things that really struck me about it. First, I knew about the Munich 72 massacre, was familiar with that, seen Munich. I was actually an extra in Munich.
Really?
Yeah, one of my first jobs as an actor. But I didn't know that it was a sports team that covered it. I thought it was a news team. I didn't know a sports team changed the way we tell these kinds of tragic events forever. But also the story of Jeff in the center of it as this, young, ambitious producer who's kind of being pushed and pulled by these two men, a legend like Rune, who he wants to impress to advance his career, and then a mentor in Marvin who is kind of the voice of what journalism is supposed to be. So that struggle for him, but also not being able to think because he has to do his job, was just a rich opportunity, and I knew I wanted to be a part of it. So as soon as I was done, made the call, yes. Then Tim immediately got me in contact with Jeff Mason, who was such a resource. Not only did he help us get the rights to the actual footage, which was a game changer, because we didn't know we were gonna get that footage until about 2 weeks before we started shooting. And Tim and Martz had to go back and sort of address the script to facilitate all this great footage we now had. But it was also obviously a challenge for us as actors because you can't have a phony note. You have to be real. Jim McKay's right there, best actor in the movie, in a lot of ways. But Jeff also told me what he went through that day, made it very clear that they were just doing their job. There was no time to think. You were a professional, and you did what you were trained to do. Like Journalism 101 kicks in that situation. But he also, like Tim said, got me into control booths at CBS Sunday Sports, at Madison Square Garden, and I think a lot of the times they thought I was just there to see sports games for free, which I was, but I was also learning at the time, so it was really nice. And being in those rooms, you learn the language. It's a very specific language. It's a shorthand, and anyone who's been in those booths would see through it if we didn't hold ourselves to 100% authenticity to what they go through. And those couple months of research really gave me the foundation, and that wouldn't have been possible without Jeff Mason.
That's great. Peter, let's first note that this is 21 years after another great movie about journalist ethics that you were a part of, Shattered Glass. And I wonder if, just when you saw this one come along, again, what for you kind of was the most appealing aspect, and then also how did you deal with the lack of what John was saying? You have the guy to talk to. Rune died in 2002. Were there other ways to kind of get a sense beyond the script of what he was all about?
I didn't think it mattered very much. I thought, sometimes when I'm playing a real person that nobody knows that well, there are people that know Rune, but I think most people don't. Is being true to yourself is being true to them, right? Like, I honor myself and that will honor them. I won't throw them under the bus just like I wouldn't throw myself under the bus. So I really didn't worry about it that much at all. I'm very, very script oriented, as Tim knows. It's interesting when I hear Tim talk because you talk like a journalist. The way that you approached this is, I'm like, wouldn't it be nice if people got into that kind of granular in terms of understanding an event? When I met him, the thing that made me want to do the movie is I read the script and I liked the script. I'd seen the documentary Day in September, was meeting him, and it's just so obvious when you hang out with this guy for 10 minutes that he has like a really strong dedication to a kind of authenticity, that it's really what he cared about most. And but yeah, you sound like, I wish the news were like that these days. That was the other thing that attracted me to the project, was that I could see that these questions that were being asked in a very kind of simple, sincere, naive way by these guys, that it's not really their job, but they're trying to think about the news and the way that the news should go out and the way that all of us think about it. And when I see Jim McKay's performance in this movie, that's why I do the movie. I feel almost like we are all actors trying to be in kind of the same world as that documentary footage in whatever way that we can, but we're supporting that moment. The movie is leading up to that moment. I think people react very emotionally to that moment because it's a man who's not making the moment about himself. I mean, Rune Ulrich went on to make The Celebrity Anchor And all these celebrity anchors that we have in one way or another, it's about them. And I saw the humility of a man trying to serve the information, and that's what really drew me to the project.
Thank you. Ben Marvin Bader died in 2012, I believe, and so again, in this case, was there for you a need that you felt to dig beyond the script, or for you, I mean, he seems like, certainly from the script, that, and what, like John said, there's, in a way, the conscience of the room, like, you know, a guy who's advocating for the old school way of doing things, I think, right? And I assume that seems like what he was really like.
Yeah, I think the need to dig deeper than the script. I mean, I just think it's your sort of your basic duty to if someone existed, to find out as much as you can. It didn't, to be honest, it didn't. Sometimes the script is just a representation of something, well, it always is, and it's not necessarily when you do research on them, it's not necessarily reflected in the script. There was a very limited amount I could find about Marvin Bader. What I could find was very helpful because it was consistent. He was sort of universally liked and admired. There's a couple of quotes will do it sometimes. Bob Iger said something that was really helpful. You know, irascible, grumpy, huge-hearted, warm, loved whom he worked with and loved by those he loved who he worked with, loved by those he worked with. And but Tim's script was accurate to that. And I've actually never discussed this with Tim, not because I avoid talking to directors, but because I never discussed why, him being the conscience of the movie, and on whether or not that was something they found out from Jeff Mason. I assume it wasn't. But to me, it seems he was a producer of live events, more logistical than technical broadcast man. But he was both sides. But he was somebody whose job it was to troubleshoot enormous events, massive logistical events that hadn't really occurred before. So they were broadcast, and they were hundreds and hundreds of people staying in hotel rooms, and gasoline bills, and all this kind of thing. So he was this kind of nexus point between the two, and I think it sort of seemed to me anyway accurate that he would be the one concerned about possible terrible things happening, possible disasters, because that was his job to foresee them and prevent them. So it stands to absolute reason, aside from conscience, it would stand to reason that he would be qualified to spot a problem before it comes. I'm sure that their job is just to shoot it as best as possible and get it out there, right?
Follow the story wherever it goes.
Yeah, follow the story wherever it goes, and live cut it really well. And that wasn't Marvin's job. It was to look after everybody, but also to make sure nothing awful happened.
Right. Well, we've talked about the fact that it affects your job as actors to be interacting with real existing footage. But another thing that I imagine might have affected the way you worked was the space itself and the way it was filled with. I won't spoil what it was filled with. So Tim, can you first just explain how you guys landed on that one primary setting, just the layout of that room, and then also what you filled it with?
He wants to know about our really awesome gear.
That's true.
All this stuff works.
Yes.
I mean, I just have to say, that's one of the things that's amazing about this movie being in it, is the monitors they weren't green screens. The reel-to-reels worked, the fax machine seemed to work. I mean, all of that is unbelievable.
That never happens. Especially
No,
with old
it's
things.
strange.
You show up on the day and it doesn't work. Fake it. Never had to do that.
Right.
Always worked.
And that doesn't happen by accident, right, Tim? You guys
And Germans.
sourced that stuff, but also the room itself. I mean, you didn't make up what this room looked like, right? There were some records, weren't there?
No, especially the control room. I could show you pictures of the original control room that we got from Jeff Mason, compared to how our set looked, and it would be like really amazed. With some other rooms, we maybe took a little bit more liberties or so, but the control room, for example, is really accurate. And the production designer found the original construction plans and more or less, according to them, rebuild it, and then also these the private photos we got from Jeff or whatever that were really helpful, and then as they said, like I just thought, like, if you do a film about the media is ultimately then in a way about technology also, right? About cameras, about telephones, about walkie-talkies, and I thought, like, if you do something about that, then this also has to be real in a way, right? They gotta be able, if John gives a direction as Jeff, it has to have some kind of a effect on the monitor wall, and I wanted everything that comes. This is basically about a movie about people reacting to things that's coming from the outside, and I always wanted to happen that in real, right? So we try to simulate as much as possible. I mean,
That's funny you say that, because I had a feeling at one point when we were filming, I was like, this reminds me of when I did a submarine movie. And because it was like that, right? Like, you're underwater, the periscope goes up, and they're out there somewhere. And it had the same technical aspects and the same camaraderie and all of that kind of stuff.
it's funny that you say that, because I watched Das Boot again. Preparation. Yeah.
But it was. I mean, it was claustrophobic, and it was stuffy, and it was hot.
Cameras, ducking under cameras.
Everything, and we were all in there. I thought, for me, one of my favorite moments, and I don't get to go outside, is when the helicopters go overhead, and everyone's like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go see it. It's like almost like a submarine when you go up on the top and you get some fresh air in the moment. I just feel like there's this need to escape this room, but Jeffrey stays in it. And I also wanted, in that, beyond the set pieces, I think we gotta give a lot of credit to our background actors. You know, oftentimes when you make a film, background actors come in and out, you never see them again. They were so much part of the ensemble, and a lot of them got speaking roles in it.
I actually think one of the most vocal actors every time we went to go do a scene was one of those background actors. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Anyway, they did such a fantastic job, and they played with us. They were there. They listened. They were there. And some of them, I believe, had broadcast experience, right?
Yeah, we had some, because I then also went to control rooms in Germany, and then we had some of the people that are in the background. My idea was to have some people that worked really in control rooms, because, as John said, it's just a very specific way of moving and everything. I wanted to have also the background to feel real in a way.
Well, this is one of the first audiences to get to see this movie. It was at Venice, it was at Telluride, but people are really still catching up to it. And so I wonder, of you guys, who's had a chance to see this movie with audiences? What have you made of the kind of feedback that you've received from them? And also, I believe, from Jeff, who again is very much with us and has seen the film.
Can I check? Because I just said when we were, I don't know, with John Palmer, with the producer, that I experienced, because this is the second screen that I experienced in the US. Like, I had was in Telluride and here, and I found it really interesting that it's so different how much more engaged the audience is in a way. Like, for example, I never had a screening where everybody laughed here when the athlete, you know, the guy who's it was really great to see with you here. It was I think it's, and of course also if we showed the film in Germany, they also reacted to different things, right? You can feel there are different issues, so to say, or topics that are present there, maybe even more than here.
I haven't seen it with an audience. I unfortunately missed Venice because I was working and Telluride, and I also don't. I guess I'm It makes me anxious seeing it with an audience. So I saw it with it does. I don't know what
It makes me anxious watching it by myself.
Really? I'd rather watch it by myself.
Are you kidding me? It's
No.
terrible by yourself.
But I will say, as far as Jeff Mason goes, you know, he was when we were early days, he was worried. He was definitely anxious about this story being told. And slowly he sort of started to let his guard down, and I think we assuaged his fears as he saw dailies come in and all those kinds of things. But when he saw it, he wrote me the most wonderful email, giving it his blessing, so excited, and he continues to be very excited that it's coming out, and eager to do anything he can to champion it. So having his blessing is, that's pretty amazing, yeah.
I think Thomas was there and John, the two producers, when he watched it. I unfortunately couldn't experience it when he watched it for the first time, and then he turned to them and I think like quite moved, said like, this is exactly how we experienced it. I want to add one more thing, because he said to me that's important that I mention this, because he's a very humble guy. He said like, of course, he also took certain artistic liberties to combine functions that were originally done by several people in his character. So
Sure.
Just wanted to mention that.
Well, I guess just as a final thing, maybe Ben, you could start us off and we'll come down the line and just talk about, is there something that you hope people take away from this film? And also, part B, if it's all right, just, do you think the media, I guess I'm part of it, and to some extent we're a bunch of us are, but just like, have people learned 52 years later, or would they make better, would they have learned from some of the mistakes or pitfalls that occurred in that control room 52 years ago?
Well, that's a very simple question. I'll answer very quickly indeed. Very eloquently. I think in the words of Heidegger, I think that the tragedy is that we haven't learned, and the part is, is it just human nature? Is it Roman circus? Do we want to go and watch? And the more we watch, do we get more desensitized? But what I find sort of if I want some, I don't know about what people take away from it. I think that's down to them. I can't answer that. But I hope it just asks a question again, so we think about it again, about the responsibility, or at least the effect of live coverage of any event, and what that means, what consequences of that are, whether they're intended, unintended, unforeseen. We have to be aware of that. But how can we in any way control it or mitigate for it when everybody has it in their phone and everybody's got it in their pocket and can live stream at any moment? This is probably starts to get really depressed. I'm going to bring everybody down. I don't know. I'm an actor. I say other people's lines. No one's written these. You can tell. But I suppose it's just that these men were innocent. They were trained to do this, but they still were troubled by it. And I suppose I hope that we can try and again be troubled by it at least, and worry about the consequences of it.
I think on this day, Pandora's box was open. It has been amplified and has become commonplace, especially in our 24-hour news cycle. I don't even think the questions that were asked among our characters on that day are asked in many newsrooms anymore. I think it is driving only towards the sensational and only towards the ratings. And because of that, I think we all know this, we've become extraordinarily polarized as a country. So my hope, I think, you can't, like Ben said, you can't control what an audience walks away with. But my hope, two things. One, people will go into this with their preconceived notions of what this film is, checked at the door, and go into it with an open mind. And second, I hope they can walk out asking those questions again about what their consumption of the media should be and what their expectation of news is, and maybe start talking to people in different camps about how we've allowed the media to push us deeper and deeper, apart.
Peter, Tim, if you'd like.
Well, I guess I'll just say that obviously what's true in 1972 is still true today in terms of the events that are taking place in the movie. And what I hope people don't come away talking about are the issues that the movie doesn't get into. The movie is really about who gets to tell the story. Does the camera tell the truth? How do we get back to sharing a common, simple truth that is the story? So that's my simple hope for the movie.
Well, it's hard to top that, but no, I want to say, as Ben said, like today everybody has a camera and the TV in their pocket at the same time. I mean, and I think it is interesting, especially for today's audience, then to take a step back and to look when was that a tragic event like this was on live television for the first time. To a lot of these questions, I at least think answers are not simple. We just want to raise them. To a lot of these questions, I don't know the answer. Can we show violence on TV or not? Of course, there are also examples where it led to something at the end, positive movement to show tragic things that happen. So I also don't think that it's not a solution just to. I think this movie is ultimately about the importance, but also the complexity on reporting on a crisis situation. And I think, as you said, and in this case it's interesting because we were sports people, so we can, in a way, they had this innocent view on this, so we can raise all these questions and confront them with them that are important questions.
Well, thank you guys for a great film. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.